In this episode, you're going to learn how to turn strangers into buyers by using your podcast as your top of funnel.
Hello, I'm Anthony Winery.
And I'm Ty Gaucher.
So look, Ty, when it comes to our podcast and using it as a top of funnel, as a billboard to attract the listeners we want to reach, to nurture them with our content, and to turn them into a paying client. Because let's be honest, I love podcasting. You listen right now, you probably love podcasting, but you also love making money. And if we want to make money with our podcast, we need to have a podcast that is able to attract, nurture, and convert our listeners into clients. And that's something that so many podcasters struggle with. That's something that you might be struggling with right now. So today we're going to give you the step-by-step process that you can start to follow today, straight away, without skipping a beat on exactly how to do that. So Ty, let's dive straight into it.
So, like you said, it really is a step-by-step process. And of course, what we're trying to do here is use the podcast as a top of funnel to initially be discovered through the show before we then convert people by nurturing them through the content and then actually turning them into a buyer. So it all starts with being discovered and found through your podcast as the first touch point that potential clients have with you. And Anthony, what is the best way to be discovered with your podcast that we always bang on about?
So the best way for you to be found and discovered by new listeners, your ideal listeners, is through Podcast SEO.
And what is Podcast SEO for anyone that is new to the show?
Podcast SEO is your process of ranking your podcast higher on Apple and Spotify specifically. Podcast SEO has nothing to do with Google, specifically optimizing your show for Apple and Spotify, because that's where listeners, your ideal listeners, your potential clients are going on these platforms to find new shows to listen to. So when you can rank high on the platforms, you can be more discovered and you can be found by your ideal listeners. It's so much easier to grow this way and attract the right people.
Yeah, and another point, not only is it just the most common way that people find podcasts, not through social media, not through anything else, they just search, they look on Apple or Spotify. Not only that, but also this means that these listeners or potential listeners, they're also higher intent, right? They're also more likely to become clients on the basis that they're actually looking for help on this subject, or they're aware of the problem they have and they're looking to solve it.
If someone types in how to reduce anxiety as an entrepreneur, guess what they're looking for? A podcast specifically to help them solve their problem. And when you have the keywords how to reduce anxiety in your actual show name, your episode title, your show notes, you're far more likely, you rank way higher for those keywords. And guess what? You're now positioned as the solution to their problems, because that's the only way you're then going to help them click, listen, and eventually become a client. But that is step one, actually ranking for the right keywords.
There we go. And when you do that, you're now showing yourself to eager listeners and potential clients who are actually looking for what you've got to offer. So this is brilliant.
So what keywords, what search terms do you believe your audience are typing in on Apple and Spotify in order to discover your show? Add that in your show name, episode titles, and show notes. Sorry, but I'm realizing like we're talking theoretical, but I'm making it practical.
Brilliant. There we go. So we've thought about what people are typing in. We've plastered that everywhere across our podcast. So we are now a beacon to those who are looking. So that's great. We're now using the podcast as a top of funnel, right? Because this is their first touch point. They're finding you. But then, of course, we want to turn them into a buyer. So we don't stop there. We'll then have to nurture them well enough to the point where they actually make their way down your funnel and eventually come even deeper into your ecosystem. And so most people think this is just a case of making great content and that take care of itself. And to an extent, that's true. But that leaves a lot to chance and it leaves a lot out of our control and a bit of a foggy way of doing it, right, Anthony? Just saying, I just make great content and people will enjoy it. There's actually a much more methodical approach we can take, right?
Absolutely. And that comes down to having a demand-based content strategy. So this is your own process where you're being strategic about what topics you cover on the show. For us, what we've found to work the best when it comes to turning strangers into listeners, into actual clients, is really focusing on addressing the specific pain point, the challenges your listeners are going through, and answering those questions, helping them solve those problems every single episode. When you do this, you build up the know, like, and trust, and you also display your own area of expertise, once again positioning you as the authority and the solution to their problem. When you do this, is literally the only way that you can eventually hope that they're going to pay you money and want to work with you, because you're positioned as authority, as the solutions to their problem. You can't skip over this point, right, Tig?
For sure. And it's also really important to say that we still need to be packaging this in a way that works for people who are at the top of your funnel, right? So for example, with our podcast, if we just made episodes like how to improve your podcast SEO for our potential listeners and clients that don't yet know what podcast SEO is, it's not really going to stand out that much. It's just the real value of the episode will just go over most people's heads because they're not yet really aware of that. So we have to remember that when we are talking about these pain points, we have to talk about them in a way that people understand them. They understand the pain they've got. They might not necessarily understand the solution they need. So instead of us making an episode and saying, improve your podcast SEO, we might make an episode and say, why no one is finding your podcast on Apple and Spotify. And this then taps into the market that they're first learning about this, right? Again, top of funnel. And then we teach them about this subject. And through us, we're nurturing because we're explaining what podcast SEO is. We're understanding their problem and we're also providing the solution. So we're meeting them where they are and we're bringing them deeper into the ecosystem with us, providing them lots of value.
And that's exactly what we want to encourage you to do with your podcast if you want to nurture your listeners as well. The other piece that I think is super important is thinking about the actual formatting of the content. If you're trying to use your podcast as a lead gen tool, it's going to be super important to focus on solo episodes. So why, Tig? Why solo episodes?
Well, again, it's really putting things fully in our control, isn't it? With guests, you can't really know for sure that you're going to be speaking to the listener's pain points in the way that you want to speak to them. With you have total control over that. And not only that as well, when you have guests, the spotlight is on them and you're positioning them as the authority. When if you really want people to build that parasocial relationship with you, which if you don't know what that is, simply the name of the relationship that we as creators have with our audience, it's one to many, they know you, but you don't necessarily know them kind of relationship that we're building. We obviously do want to know our audience, but you get the point. And doing solo episodes really helps to build this because again, the spotlight is on you. It's more intimate time with you and your audience rather than you talking to your guest and it really being the guest more so with your audience. We're big advocates of solo episodes. As you can tell, most of our episodes are solo episodes and we know lots of great podcasts that are even just solo episode focused. So just because most podcasts are interviews or guest based doesn't mean you have to be. Think about what you want, what your goals are for the podcast. And if it really is to take strangers, nurture them and turn them into clients, then solo episodes are a must in how you deliver your content strategy. So now we're being found by new listeners and potential clients through Podcast SEO. We're nurturing them and providing them lots of value and really helping them get to know us through our content strategy and through solo episodes as well. But now it's time to help them take the next step and really get deeper into your ecosystem, whether that's getting onto your email list, joining your community, maybe even booking a call with you. But of course, we want them to take the next step. And again, it's not necessarily jump into bed with you, pay you money or anything like that. It's just a step closer, right? So for us, I think even when we had just started and before we were even getting, say, 1,000 downloads a month, we were getting pretty decent conversions from our call to action, Anthony, right? And
Correct.
So I think we can speak on what worked for us here.
Absolutely.
As a way of bringing people forward. There's something specific we did, I'm thinking of here.
Yeah, for sure. So the first thing when it comes to your lead magnet, because I think a lot of people might think, oh, it needs to be the call to action, it needs to be magical. It doesn't matter how magical your call to action is if what you're selling, i.e. your lead magnet, what you're offering, your bribe in order to get your listener into your ecosystem, if that's not attractive enough, who cares? And if you're specifically trying to generate leads and then book calls and then close deals through your podcast, your call to action, your lead magnet rather, needs to be something that feels personalized to your audience. For us, that's a personalized audit plus our best-selling book, Podcast Marketing. So for you, if you ask yourself, what's something super personalized I can give to my audience? Could you do an audit? Could you do a specific type of review? Or what's something that's highly valuable that you can give them? Think about if you have a process to help your clients get a specific result. What's step 1 or step 2? Can you give them that piece that they would actually be willing to pay for? Now, here's the key part. Once you have this personalized, high value lead magnet, and really think about this a lot, you then need to make sure how you actually give them the lead magnet is also personalized. So what we do is we don't have any automations. We send you to a specific landing page, they enter their details, and you or a team member reaches out to them directly and make it feel personalized. And what we do is we say, hey, just confirming this is insert name here, host of insert podcast here, before I send over the personalized audit, ? This is simply a way for me to actually personally reach out to you or our listeners, for you, your listeners, and create that touch point. This is so important if you want to get them booked on a call or if you want to nurture them. They need to feel like they're having a relationship with you. So by asking the request of, is this you, before I send over the lead magnet, whatever that is for you, and then them saying yes, now you're in, now the conversation has started.
Right on. So ultimately what we're saying here is, look, the next step, you've got people in, you've nurtured them, but of course to get them to take the next step, you need a valuable next step. And what worked really well for us, even when, again, it was a very small audience, the fact that we were offering something personalized, that went a long way as a really strong lead magnet and a really strong incentive to bring people into our world. So that is what we'd encourage you to do. Think about doing, as Anthony gave some good suggestions there.
To clarify as well, it can be like through social media. So you can reach out to them through social media. Maybe they have to text you a certain word, whatever it is. The whole point, keep it personalized. And your job there is to then engage with them and get them onto a call. And of course, the final part of turning them into a client is actually closing them and selling. But of course, this isn't a sales podcast. We're not going to get into that. We believe you're a fantastic salesman. And the good thing is your podcast has been doing all the selling for you and all the nurturing. So if you get them on that call, they're so much likely they're red hot leads who are going to basically say, hey, Tig, dude, take my money. And by the way, if you listen to this right now, or you want to come on a call with me and Tig and say, take my money, we'll take your money. We'll have to do that, right?
If we can help you.
If we can help you and if it's the right fit. So that's really it.
And yeah, you're right. If you're listening right now, I'm sure you're a great salesman, saleswoman, you can do the job. But of course, we have to get people to that stage first, right?
So look, the point here is if you genuinely want to turn your podcast into a lead generation tool, you have to focus on optimizing your show for podcast SEO, for being discovered on the platforms, having the right keywords, the search terms that your listeners are searching in on Apple and Spotify to find you, and then having your content strategy and the episode title speaking to their specific pain points, focusing on solo episodes where you yourself are positioned as the authority, providing them the solutions to their problem so they can build the know, like, and trust. At that point, it's up to you to provide a strong call to action with an incredibly irresistible lead magnet that's personalized to your audience. Then reaching out to them directly, starting and engaging that conversation, and then moving them on to a sales call, strategy session, discovery call, whatever that is for you. That is a process you'll have to go through. And that's what you should focus on and be intentional with. If again, you want to turn more strangers who discover your podcast into a nurtured lead and into a paying client. That's a process you have to go through.
There you go. That is how you use your podcast as your top funnel and turn new listeners into clients.